Today I'm talking about Pantheon, Rise of the Fallen, and some thoughts on the UI and how to improve it. I know there was a feedback thread in Discord about this. So they asked for some feedback. This was a while ago, but I only started playing again like a week or two ago. I feel like the game is in a really good state right now as far as gameplay. The mechanics are really cool. Of course, there's like a lot of divisiveness around the art style, but I personally think it's really nice. Coming from playing P99 EverQuest, it's a huge improvement. um, so anyway, I think things are going well, and I'm really excited about all the progress that's been made, and I'm excited about the changes that are coming for early access. And that is going to be on December 13th, so mark your calendars. All of this is to say, I really like where Pantheon is at now, and I want to provide a little bit of constructive criticism for the UI, to talk about how it feels to play the game right now for me, as well as some of the issues that I'm seeing, some suggestions for what to change, and the process and methodology that I'm using to come up with these suggestions. But hopefully, this discussion will help spark some ideas, if nothing else, and contribute to more discussion. So, the UI is something that has been discussed a lot lately in the groups that I've been in, because the rest of the game is actually feeling pretty good. So let's check out what the UI looks like right now. So this is kind of what it looks like on my screen. I've customized it a little bit. I've dragged the health bar windows from over here to over here. I've moved my health bar window here. I moved the target window here and moved the macros over. These are kind of in the default positions, I think. Buffs are up here. Okay, so this is what we're working with right now. I think as far as like prototyping a game, this is like a great start. It's well past initial prototype, but there's a lot of polish that can be done and a lot of things to make the experience better. The main feelings that I get when I'm playing the game right now are I feel overwhelmed, both by all the stuff happening on the screen as well as the decisions that I have to make. And this was happening even at like level 4 when I didn't have that many abilities. I had like a couple down here and I had a couple up here. This feedback is mostly for like group combat as well. Like playing solo as a ranger is actually like pretty easy, and I can understand everything that's going on. I do still get a little bit overwhelmed of like, am I doing the right thing? Am I being as efficient as possible? Um, and like, I feel like I'm dying to know some information that's like missing, uh, or that I'm not like able to feel intuitively from the game. So like, there's this part of me, like, I feel anxious, and I feel overwhelmed. So my feedback is mostly to help alleviate those feelings. Or either way you go with the suggestions that I'm going to make, and if you like them or if you don't, it's fine. But I think that initial starting place of like, what does it feel like to play the game? That's really important feedback. It feels overwhelming. It feels really complicated, and like my brain hurts after like 30 minutes to an hour. Sometimes I'm pushing through. If I'm in a really good group, and I'm starting to get used to the UI and stuff, then it's not as bad. I can get used to it. See, that's the thing. I can see people getting used to this and it being okay. But I think it could be better and not cause those initial like overwhelm feelings and anxiety feelings. Okay, so that's where I'm coming from as far as like what feelings I'm having, and hopefully you understand that this is coming from a place of love. Okay, let's just check out the clip first and see what's going on so we can get kind of a baseline and understand what's happening. I'm a ranger. We're pulling in this spider. Start shooting at it. I jump in, jump back out and do some more damage. And now it's fleeing and it's about to die. The overwhelm of combat is like all of my abilities down here. They're all animating the entire time, turning color like saturated and not saturated. When I use one, the entire bar has that animation. So there's like 10 things animating at the same time, on top of this animating, on top of this animating, on top of all the characters animating, on top of all these bars moving, and my bars moving. And I have to like look at the readiness to see if I can actually use these abilities and which ones I should use. Because like at the end of the battle, I don't want to use all of my readiness. So then when I jump in combat for the next battle, I can use my slow immediately, because like slow is the most important aspect here. So if we want to look at the UI elements just from a basic overview, I've made some adjustments of where some of the layout is. So I've moved all the important stuff as close to the center of the screen as possible. That's because I have like a 22-inch monitor or something, and like to look from the center of my screen here all the way to the default spot of the group health bars over here is like actually moving my eyeball, if I don't move my head, all the way to the corner of my eye, and that's an uncomfortable position. So like I'd have to turn my head slightly, and if I'm turning my head every single time that I want to like check if we're about to wipe and how everyone's health is, it's just not comfortable. So that's why I moved this stuff to the center. I know it doesn't look great because it's overlapping a lot of the 3D game world, but I think with some of the improvements we're going to talk about, that can be improved a lot as well. Because like this whole thing could be a lot more compact. There's probably a lot of detail in here that we don't need all the time. Okay, so an overview of the UI we have over here is the combat window. So right now I have it only showing the stuff that I'm doing, but you can have it show like your group or every player that's like in your vicinity. And even with just my combat spam going in here, it goes too fast at level 10 for me to like understand what's going on. I think it doesn't help that I've increased the text size so I can read it on my screen. And so there's all these lines that are wrapped. So like a single message is taking up 2 lines. So that's probably not helping. Let's see. But it is useful to have this little text box sometimes, because like when there's green messages in here, I know that I'm getting healed, and that's like an indicator to me that I might be dying. But that's a whole that's a whole other issue that like I don't really know when I'm dying. So we can talk about that later. Anyway, I set up my macros here. The only one I'm using in combat is the assist button, but I have like my selling macros, which I want on there and I don't want to delete. So I think like this could be improved a lot by having different pages of macros, or like different like multiple macro tabs or something, so I could like have the buying ones over here because I don't care about them, or just like completely hide them while I'm in combat, and then I just have like this one button. Or if I could like put a button down here, that'd be even better. Right here we have the target window, so there's a lot of information going on here. I have all of the debuffs that are happening to the mob. At the bottom, if it was actually casting buffs on itself, it'd be showing up down here, and that's actually a key component when you're like fighting goblins. They cast pressure plate, which is like a damage shield. It reflects the damage back to you, so it's really important as a DPS class to know when that's on, and know that you're being hit, because like you can die very easily from that if you're using all of your special abilities and critting and stuff. So you learn that pretty fast. but it still isn't super convenient, or like super intuitive that it's happening. Because it's just this tiny icon, and then like there's some floating text here that says you're getting damaged. Um, but overall, there's so much detail and clutter on the screen that it doesn't stand out. Over here, we have our own player information. So the water and bread, I don't know if this is staying in. They've talked about removing it altogether. But if the system does stay in, we don't need this information during combat. Like, I also don't need the buffs during combat. That's why I didn't move the buff bar. I don't even know if you can move it, but I didn't. So like if this could go over here, that would be nice, and it would clear up some of the screen space here. This text box is our group chat and like general information chat, as well as out of character and auction and stuff like that. You can make different tabs to like filter different messages, which I think is good because sometimes if there's a lot of people on the server and they're all chatting, then you can miss your group chat. So in that case, I would filter this down to just group chat and like XP messages and stuff like that. This is my defensive target, so this is helpful if I'm trying to heal someone or whatever. As a ranger, I can actually heal, so it's good to know who I'm targeting, but it's not like critical information, because I can actually see it on here as well. So that's why I have it moved over to the side. I'm curious if this could even be like completely removed and just rely on the highlights here for what your defensive target is. Because when I'm healing, I'm actually only looking here. I'm like hitting F1, F2, F3, F4, F5, and I can see who I'm targeting and their health. I press my heal hotkey, and then I still see their health change, and all of that works pretty good. And then moving on to this area, this is the group information window. So you can see who's in your group. You see their name, health bar, and then their different ability bars here. So yellow is endurance, and then for Dire Lords, it's like essence or whatever, and mana for casters, and some of the other ones have different bars for their different resources. These icons represent what class you're playing, and there's even this nice little hidden compass. So if you're far away from your team and you want to figure out where they are, you can like follow the compass to get there. I really like the way that this is designed. And it's also cool if you hover over the class icon here, it'll tell you what class they are in text, so you don't have to have the symbols memorized, although I'm assuming over time people will have the symbols memorized. And this little icon is the group party leader thing. I didn't really notice that until I was like level 10 or something. But you start noticing it when you start changing the leader of your group. That's cool. I think that's nice to have. I guess you don't really need that information in combat either. Okay, and then there is text that pops up behind this window as well. I'm not even sure if we'll see it in this video, but it shows up for like your skill increases, and if you have completed a quest, it'll show up there. And then you can also see when I'm casting a spell, the casting bar is right there. Right now you can't move it, or at least I couldn't figure out how to move it. I'm assuming once it can, I could move it up here, and then like I'd be able to see. I wouldn't have everything overlapping, but for right now, uh, it's fine. Like I can make do, and that's like not probably not a huge thing to be able to allow that to be moved. Here is the like options bar, so you can see like all the different menus, I guess menu bar. So now let's go over where are my eyes looking. Initially, I'm looking over here because I know the pulls are coming from this area, so I want to see how many mobs are coming and if I can target one and start shooting my bow right away, or if there's multiple, I need to wait for the rogue trap to trap one, and then I can figure out which one to shoot. Because if I shoot the one that's trapped, then the trap breaks, and then we have two mobs beating on us. So this is a critical moment. Now we can see, okay, there is a spider. He's coming in. I'm clicking the assist button. It's not showing up. I'm assuming the tank isn't actually targeting it for some reason. So I end up hitting the hotkey for target nearest NPC. And then I move over here and I can see, okay, I think there's only one. I guess I still haven't identified it yet because I haven't taken any actions. And finally, I identify it and I start casting Fractal Arrow. So like it's safe for me to cast on this. I always open the same way to optimize damage. I do Fractal Arrow first. Then you'll see me do a couple of bow hits. So Swift Shot was this one. So you can see at this point, my two abilities here opened up where I can either jump into combat or jump out of combat. So what I'm normally doing is jump into combat, and then my job is to slow the mob because our shaman isn't high enough to slow the attack speed of the mob. At least I think that's what this like bramble ability does. The thing about this ability is it's a group synergy ability, so it only works if one of the casters, like the shaman here, will actually cast their opening gap buff. At this point, I've shot a couple arrows, the momentum has opened up, and you'll see me jump into action. So there we go, jumping into action. I use this ability. The next thing I'm doing is doing this one so I can critical hit. And then I'm going to start looking for, is the opening available for me to do this ability, the bramble ability to slow the damage speed. So right now, so far, I've been mostly looking here and looking at the numbers on my screen because I have like these kind of memorized, and maybe I like glance down here as I'm doing the shooting to like see when these abilities have opened up for me. But it's like pretty obvious when it happens because they go from gray to like saturated, and there's two of them that pop at once. So that part actually works pretty good. Then I'm immediately coming in here and pressing 4 to activate Fray so I can do my next damage ability, which is a guaranteed critical hit. So see that happen. Fray. After these pop up, I immediately switch my eyes to right here because I want to find out, is that opening gap happened yet? And it shows up in the window here as a little target. So now I've jumped in and I'm pressing my abilities and I see, okay, the opening gap is there. It's this target one. Let's see, it's this target ability. It's really tiny, so it's like kind of hard for me to tell, but it has a distinct icon, so I can tell that it's on there, right? That was a really nice thing that I figured out eventually. So you don't need verbal confirmation for this. You can tell without like being in voice chat. So that's actually like, that's a good thing. But the downside is I'm like during the fight until this happens, I'm literally staring at the buff bar and going between here and here to like see which abilities can I use and is that thing on there so I can slow it. So as you can see, my eyes are switching back and forth, like right here, from here to here, 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 here. And what's happening is I feel like I'm playing the UI. I don't feel like I'm playing a 3D game. What I want to be looking at is this area here. And I want to be able to like intuitively feel when my abilities are ready. And I want to intuitively feel when this opening gap thing happens. So I can use the correct ability at the correct time. But that's not happening right now. Right now, my eyes are going back and forth right here. Sometimes they shoot over here to like see, is my team doing okay? So like I'm glancing between here, 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 and I can see my health bar here as well. But since it's like not lined up with these, it's not as smooth as it could be to like figure out if I'm dying and if my group's dying and like if we're all okay and if I should heal anyone. I had it up here before. I also tried it like right here and moving the group thing up, but I found that I actually needed it more closer to the bar down here because I need to know when I have readiness and I need to know when I have momentum. Although I don't really find myself looking at the momentum at all because I can't really tell when it's filling. The main thing I'm looking at is the hotkeys of like, are they available or not available and how many seconds left. So I mentioned before, I do look at the readiness because I want to know like how many of the abilities can I actually use, because in combat I have the choice of using these three actually that use readiness. So I have them in order of importance for like damage, which is these two, and then this does more damage, this does a little bit less damage, and this is the slow that I was talking about that I have to do at the beginning. So I have it laid out this way so I can do the slow. I always do the slow, and then I'm just focusing on like these two. And these two, you can tell how many of them you can do based off of the bar. It has these little like ticks. So I could do up to 3 at a time if they didn't have a cooldown. Like I could potentially do 3 if I got rid of this one and had another melee one, which might be an option later on as I level up. I don't know. I would be looking at 3 of them at once. But anyway, so I'm like looking at these, I'm looking at this. I'm occasionally looking at this, but it's a little bit more obvious when these are popping up. I'm still like glancing my eye down here to see like, okay, are these ones available? Normally I'm waiting till all 4 of them are getting close to available. Like if this is open, this is at 1, 2, 3, for example, then I know I can jump back, I can crit, I can jump back in, and then I can crit again in rapid succession. And then I'm doing the most DPS because I do the most DPS with melee right now. In summary, I'm focusing all of my attention on the UI here. Now, why is that an issue? Because I want to be focusing on the game world and I want to see the cool art and see the stuff that's happening. Now, let's talk about suggestions. And first, I want to talk about an idea of like, how do we figure out what to change? I put together this list of stuff that I think could be important for evaluating UI. As a DPS class, what do I really want to know and what's the priority of that information? I want to know, like, is my team okay? I want to know survival stuff, like the overall state of combat and are we going to win? That's what I'm thinking about in the back of my head. So, like, are we wiping? Am I currently dying? Are we going to wipe? Like, predicting the future. Am I going to die soon? Are my teammates going to die soon? Is the next mob going to die soon? How many more mobs are left before we can rest? How much longer are healers and crowd control going to be able to keep up doing their job? So that involves mana or resources. All of these so far involve health bars. Do we feel powerful or weak in this situation? So I think this also has to do with health bars. So the first thing we're focused on is survival. The next thing we're focused on is, am I doing my job? Like, how effective am I being? Am I like playing my role optimized? Am I doing everything right? So for DPS, the example is my auto attack on or off? Am I actually doing damage? Is there anything preventing me from doing my normal damage? Am I too far away? Am I too close? Or am I not behind the mob if I'm a rogue? When are my abilities ready to be used? Which ability should I use next given the state of combat? This is probably what we are focusing most of our brain power on. What weaknesses can I exploit to maximize efficiency? The opening gap thing that I've been talking about. Exposure is another one. I'm sure there's going to be other group synergies. And could I increase my efficiency in any way? We have now survival and we have personal effectiveness. And the third thing is group effectiveness. How is my group doing? Are they doing their jobs okay? Because if they're not, then I want to be able to help them out and tell them, I guess basically tell them how to do their job. Okay, if we go back to looking at the game, we can see a survival based stuff is over here. Health bars, my health bar, maybe defensive target. But look at everything that we're seeing in these areas. We're seeing, aside from health, we're seeing the hunger and thirst. We're seeing the character names, which I think is good. We're seeing our resource bars, which there's 1, 2, 3 for rangers. And we're seeing all of their resource bars. We're seeing a whole bunch of information that probably isn't super relevant to combat. It is kind of nice that we can see them casting and we can see what buffs they have on. But as far as most of the time for doing my job and like the stuff that I want to focus on in combat, there's so much detail here that isn't needed. So we'll talk about that in a second. As far as me doing my job effectively, I'm looking mostly here to see what my resources are, and I'm looking down here to see which abilities are available, and basically like if I run out of readiness, then I can't do this stuff, so I'm not doing the most damage I possibly can. And if all of these are available and I'm not using them, then I'm not doing the most optimized damage. And then also what I mentioned about up here with the debuff for slowing, that is like the most critical thing. So that's like number one importance. Number two is figuring out, am I using all of the different hotkeys down here and abilities effectively? Am I running out of stuff and things like that? As far as if my team is doing their job correctly, I can tell that right now from all of the resource bars, what they're casting. I can look at all the debuffs that are on the mob, and I can look at my own buffs. I can look at the mob's health bar. That's kind of how I can tell if they're doing their job. But that's not my main focus. And I feel like I don't actually need to know that stuff the vast majority of the time. If I feel like things aren't going well, then yeah, it'd be great to have that level of detail. But a lot of the times, if you're grouping with the same people, or like you finally get into a flow and everyone knows what they're doing, you don't need all of that information, and it just ends up cluttering the UI and being stuff that you don't need. So simplifying is a big theme here. Okay, so we talked about survival, we talked about my personal effectiveness, and we talked about team stuff being right here as well. I guess what we haven't talked about at all is this UI here, which is basically telling me how much damage I'm doing. We have the health bar of the mob up here. Well, now it's down here. And I can tell if I'm being hit because there are damage numbers that pop up on this side that start floating down. I think that's kind of an interesting way of doing things. I haven't played very many modern MMOs, so I don't know if this is like a standard thing or if this is something new for Pantheon, but it's kind of interesting. I didn't understand this at all when I first started, and it just felt like there was random numbers and words flying around everywhere. But now that I understand it, it makes more sense, and I can see like some of the issue is like the overlapping numbers, for example. So you can see there's a lot of overlapping text right here. So we have shrapnel is 2 damage, and then the numbers here are my double attack damage. So I did 5 and I did 1. So you can see that here, 5 damage, 1 damage from auto attack, which you can see here, and then the other one is from shrapnel, which is the damage over time. I'm not too worried about that right now because this is something more of a known quantity of polishing. So the main issues I want to focus on is like how I'm staring at this section of my screen during the majority of the combat. Okay, so in a good group like this group, I'm not worried too much about survival. I think everyone's doing their job good. We only have one mob in camp, so not too worried about survival. I'm mostly worried about doing my own job, which is casting that slow, and I can only do that when that little target icon pops up, when the shaman casts their ability that does the opening gap. That's what I'm worried about, and then like making sure I'm using all of my abilities once they come off cooldown. I'm going back and forth here, sometimes glancing up here just to make sure. And yeah, so glancing up here isn't happening too often in this group because we're not like under threat too much. But in a group where things aren't going well, or even in this group when there's like 2 or more mobs, I need to start focusing on this as my first priority, because if someone goes down, I can heal them and bring them back up. Or I want to find out like, are we gonna wipe and then I have to run away? My point is the frequency of how often your eyes are moving in this triangle is based off of the risk of what's going on in the game here. So what I'd like to see in a game is for me to be able to intuitively tell the survival stuff. Are we wiping? Me dying or not is one of the biggest issues right now for the UI. Am I dying? Most of the time when I'm taking damage, I don't really notice. And I think the reason why is because instead of like looking at the game, seeing what's happening of like, oh, is there more spiders coming in? Are there more mobs coming in? I'm looking down here. I'm like, okay, is the opening gap ready? Are my abilities ready? So I'm like, all my focus is down here. I want my focus to be in the game world. The way I think to do that is by trying to make certain aspects of this information that you want to know as intuitive as possible. Okay, in conclusion, survival checks are the highest priority and should be assessed at a glance or even better, felt intuitively through a combination of focusing on the 3D world, like I was talking about, and maybe subtle screen effects or a quick glance at the UI. The next thing I'm trying to figure out is, am I doing my job effectively? What are my priorities for figuring that out? The highest priority is debuffing the mob, so slowing the attack speed or decreasing AC. Then the most damaging combat abilities, and then optimize smaller damage combat abilities. All right. Next is the combat state information gathering. Is it possible for me to perform powerful group synergy combos right now? And as I mentioned, I'm staring at like this tiny icon window. And also, it's really important, did the action I just took work? If so, how effective was it? If not, why, and how do I fix it next time? If it didn't work, I'm investigating like what happened in this combat log here. I can see like some damage is being mitigated. I don't really know why, even to this day. It seems to be different based off of the mob type. But anyway, this is how I'm figuring out like, oh, okay, maybe I messed something up, or there was a cooldown, which sometimes it says, or maybe I was too far away, or I'm not in the correct line of sight. So that's where I'm doing my investigation. So did it actually work? I can see that here as the combat text is going, which is great because that's in the center of the screen, so I can focus on the game world. And I can also tell there's stuff animating down here. And if stuff is animating down here, like getting grayed out, then I know that I did something. So that part is pretty good so far. Okay, let's focus in on survival now. At a glance, it's hard to evaluate, are we gonna wipe and am I gonna die? There's just too much detail happening, and we can use some cool abilities of the human mind like pattern recognition to make this much faster to evaluate. So we're talking about evaluating things in terms of milliseconds, right? Like if I have to look over here and use more than a second even to tell if we're gonna wipe and what's going on with our survival, that's probably way too much. Like I want to be able to quickly flick my eye and then flick it back really fast. Like this is probably like 20 milliseconds or something, or 100 milliseconds. Right now, it takes a lot more than that. I haven't done any like eye tracking analysis, but that'd be kind of interesting to do. I know bigger studios that have like focus testers do that stuff to track eye movement. And classic EQ, when I'm playing on P99, for example, this is easier when you line up vertically the horizontal bars of your target health, your health, and the teammate's health. So I'll show a screenshot of what it looks like in classic EQ for the way I have my UI set up. And this allows pattern recognition. So basically, if there's a block down here of your different health bars, I'm going to make them red just because I'm using like a green screen right now. So you have all these health bars. Ideally, they're the same size, right? And then you have, so this is 6, so this includes yours. And then you have the mob's health. Now with pattern recognition of my eye, ideally all this stuff is like, it can be even more compact. So it only takes up like this much of the screen probably. But anyway, with pattern recognition, I can easily see a pattern if this health bar is lower. So like in this case, you can see very quickly, if I'm looking over here and I glance over here, I can see, oh shit, something's wrong. This bar is shorter than all these bars. Okay, let's say I'm looking at the screen up here, and then I glance down here, and I'm like, oh no, we're in trouble, because all of our health bars are down here. The target's health bar is way over here still. That's trouble. So I'm recognizing that 10, 20 milliseconds of like flicking here, 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 here. That's super fast. Or I can even like feel it intuitively, because I can feel that this box is getting emptier down here, and I'm looking at like the health bar here or the health bar of the mob in the world, and I can see like, oh no, we're in trouble. Whereas the default UI, where all of the health bars are over here, and there's like all of this other information, then my eye is going like from here Ideally, I'm not staring at like the cooldowns and stuff. Yeah, let's say that issue is resolved. Then I'm going from in the game world to over here, but there's like, instead of there being 1 bar per player, there is like 3 or 4 or 5 bars per player. The most dominant color is the yellow color. Like when I go from looking here to over here, if you like just try to look at the one that draws your eye the most, it's yellow. But the yellow is endurance, and the endurance doesn't change. It doesn't matter really that much for combat. Like, yeah, it's kind of cool to see if people are running away. You might see their yellow bar going down. But the main thing I want to see is health. So health should be the one that pops out the most. That should be the most saturated, the most, like maybe even a little bit bigger, if we even need these other bars at all. I think like we potentially don't even need them at all, and have like a simplified compact view and then have an optional detailed view that does have all of this information in it. But the default would be simplified like this. If you mouse over it, maybe it changes and shows you all of the detailed information. Maybe it has the same thing where like it has a lock icon. So if you are capable of processing all of this information at once, you can lock in and see all the detailed information all at once. Of course, customization is key, but as far as like making the base UI easier to parse, I think going as simple as possible while still conveying the information they need is really important. There's a good game design philosophy of you want to take away as much stuff as you can and have the game still be good. And if you take a little bit too much, you add that back in, and then you know when the game is good. So my ideal would be something like this, where it's just like single health bars. You can mouse over it to see all the detailed stuff. But at a glance, you're using pattern recognition and intuition to figure out, are we okay? Am I okay? The other thing about am I okay that we can use is around the border of the screen, there can be red color going on like over here. That's a pretty common thing in like first person shooters. It will like be less intense as you are a little bit hurt and then start taking over more and more of the screen as you get hurt. There's usually like some breathing sounds of like getting exhausted, to let you know that you're getting hurt. You can also hear sound effects of like a crunching noise, for example, in classic EverQuest. If you take a particularly big hit, that's a big tell that you can tell like just intuitively that you're taking damage. But if my screen is filling up with red like this, I know just intuitively from my peripheral vision that something bad is happening and I need to pay attention. Right now, I don't know something bad is happening to my character unless I'm like really focusing in on that health bar that's right here, but then I'm not focusing on the other stuff I need to focus on. So yeah, I think these could all be pretty good improvements. You can also do like subtle flashing and strobing on this vignette. So I think that covers survival. The main focus is pattern recognition, and then also like trying to make things more intuitive for am I okay with different screen effects and sounds. So it's not just a UI problem. There's a lot that can be changed to improve this. Okay, so now let's brainstorm and summarize kind of like what are the same kind of things that we want to solve here. Ideally, I want to reduce the feeling of overwhelm that I'm feeling like while I'm in game. And to do that, I think we want to reduce the complexity of decision making while in combat. We're already off to a great start with that with the limited action set. There's only like these 4 abilities and these 8 or 10 abilities down here that I have to choose from, which is a lot better than a game like Modern WoW where there's like just a crap ton of hotbars everywhere and you can use any ability at any time. It's super overwhelming. Off to a great start. It splits the decision making into macro versus micro. The macro is like what abilities do I bring into combat, and the micro is what am I using while I'm in combat. Can we further improve this? Probably. I think the top right bar that's over here with out of combat abilities could fade out during combat. That could free up a fairly large chunk of real estate. So the area that I'm talking about is right down here. So I have tracking, forage, and I have this thing that makes regen potions. I don't know if these are passives for every class or if there's like going to be active buttons for other classes. I think when I played Dire Lord, there were active things that I was doing up here. Maybe this idea of fading out this area wouldn't work for every class, but if that's the case, I might encourage making this only passives or like having it be a smaller area, or maybe like passives show up here but they only show up out of combat. You could mouse over it, you'd be able to see the abilities. So some people might say, well, I might want to track, or I don't know if you're going to want to forage during combat, but like I might want to apply poison if that shows up over here, I'm not sure. But I might want to make a regen potion during combat. So I think if that's the case, one way you could handle is you could have a hotkey that makes this section visible. You could have an option that forces this to always be on, but by default it would fade out. When you like mouse over it, it could fade back in. There could be a little like lock icon to make it always visible, or a hotkey that you can use to toggle this on and off. I think that would help a lot. One thing that you can notice from this is as I'm using abilities, all of these are animating as well. So yeah, as I use an ability, there's that like little timer thing that's happening to let me know when the global cooldown is over and I can use stuff again. I think just in general, reducing the amount of animations that are on screen that are pulling your attention in different areas is going to be helpful. Because we know from like UI design that there's like a hierarchy of stuff that you're looking at. There's like things that are animating and moving, draw your eye to them. My eye is drawn over here right now, looking at stuff. I see this animating. I see all this combat text animating. I see this stuff animating, but I already know in my brain, I don't even want to look at this side of the screen. Let's see, I see this animating, I see this animating, I see all of this stuff animating all the time as people are using their abilities. I see this animating, and then there's like the actual timers down here that are animating. So all of this animation is all fighting for the attention of your eyeball. And I think that's not ideal. I think we'd want to reduce the amount of stuff animating and trying to get your focus. We want your focus to be more in the middle of the screen, watching what's actually happening in the game. Next, let's talk about group synergy, the opening gap thing that casters do, and then what I'm waiting on for as a melee is to see that opening gap, which is the target right now, know, okay, that's on there, so I can cast my ability to slow the mob or reduce its AC. The issue right now is you have to focus on a very tiny UI element to determine if the open gap is on, and it's mixed in with lots of other elements that are given equal real estate, but are less important or not important at all to the job that I'm doing. So I think most of the time, I don't even care about like most of this stuff that's happening. I think it's cool to see that like things are happening, and this is like a good way to evaluate our group effectiveness, but I don't think I need to see that all the time. It would be better as just like a more simplified system where it's just the health bar. Maybe if you want to show your own debuffs, so if you want to remember like what you've already cast, that could be useful, but I think even that, doing it like classic EQ where you don't see any of this stuff and you just have to rely on your own memory, actually adds a layer of challenge to the game, which is a good level of challenge. And people can customize their UIs anyway with Gina to show buff timers if they really want to, or debuff timers. But I think for the average player, you don't necessarily need to see that, and like having a little bit of mystery of what's going on and having to remember what you've done makes things interesting. Okay, so that covers the issue. My suggestion on how to make this better, instead of like staring at this little tiny section of buff icons, I would get rid of that completely. And I would do something really cool that's in the middle of the screen. So make the opening gaps and other states you're waiting for from the group bigger, more animated, more centered on the screen to draw your attention. So if you can for a minute, imagine an animation that starts out with like a big target right here, then it like zooms in really fast right onto the mob and animates to be like small. And you see this icon over the actual NPC or maybe under its name. And so then you know like, okay, the opening gap thing is on there. You're like looking at the middle of the screen now. You just saw this huge animation come in from here to here. Your eye is immediately drawn towards that and you're like, okay, now I can slow. So you're watching the game world, you're able to see it come in from here to here. So let's take a look at that without the black screen. Okay, so here we are in game. I'm right next to the mob. I've just jumped in. Right now I'm staring at this to try to see if that target's going to show up. And sure enough, in a moment, there it is. So if instead what we saw was this happen and then it moves down here on top of the spider, probably even smaller than that, I'd be like, oh snap, that's cool. It doesn't look as good in third person because it's not, because it's like, looks like it's more on my character. So maybe it could be up here. And people might say like, well, it's already down here. What's the difference? Well, it's more in the middle of the screen. I would also advocate for removing all this stuff. Maybe as like an options menu, you could like specify which debuffs you want to see. But I think if it's in first person and you have this target come in, even if it like would animate in from here to like under the window, or maybe from wherever the person casting it was, or maybe even from like the bar right here. I think it was this guy, that the health bar. So if it came from like here and then went that would draw your attention, right? Like, okay, this dude just casted that thing, so I can tell it's on now. The other thing without UI would be to have a very noticeable sound effect and an easy to identify visual effect for when this like opening gap state happens. But there's so much other stuff going on. I'm not sure how noticeable it'll be. So at least this UI element, if nothing else, can be a supporting thing, if not like the main thing that you see. Yeah, I'm trying to figure out like where it would look best. I'm also thinking like as far as the nameplates go for the mobs right here, like this is just kind of floating up here, but the mob is actually like down here. I'd rather see the nameplate down here. If you could do like 2 render passes where you render the nameplate underneath my character in the game world, if my game character is closer to the camera than the mob, then that would be extra cool. But I know that takes a lot of like extra graphical processing to do more rendering passes. But I don't know. I don't know like what the tech is like right now and how much processing that would take. But that would be like the ultimate, right? If you could see their little nameplate under there and your neck or whatever would be overlapping it a little bit. So I think that covers the target, the opening gap. If it could be some cool animation that comes in and sticks onto either the nameplate, if the nameplate was down here, or like make it look like it's actually on the mob by, in this case, we would reduce the saturation so it looks like it's more in the game world. You'd probably reduce the saturation based off of like how close the mob is to your camera. So like if it's really close, it'd be really bright, but if it's further away, it'd be dimmer. Kind of simulate a 2D element moving in 3D space. It doesn't have to be this exact color. But yeah, that's just something, an idea to play with. Okay, to start summing things up, I think in terms of like where your eye is drawn as far as animations and stuff like that, currently your damage is the main thing. Like what's going on in the center of the screen, all of this is animating, lots of stuff is popping up. That's where your eye is drawn first. Next is your ability bar and the cooldowns. There's a lot of animation happening down here as well, and a lot of different colors and things like that. So your eyes drawn there. And then it's kind of everything else. I think this order is not ideal. The main thing that we're missing here is the survival at a glance part. You can't intuitively tell if your group is going to wipe or if you're taking damage right now. Okay, so the key goals I think with these changes are simplify everything with the option to increase detail as a player choice. There's tons of detail on the screen. I would want to see it simplified and then have like options to increase detail if necessary as a player option. Improve the intuitive evaluation and speed of the current survival status. So we've hit on that a bunch of times. Increase the visibility of group synergy. So like having that target icon like fly in from the screen and not just being a tiny little thing down here. That would be cool. Increase immersiveness by tying the UI tighter to the 3D game world. So what I mean by that is the way nameplates are working right now. For example, in this view, when I'm close to people, nameplates are kind of going crazy. Like we have this guy's nameplate is way up here. There's a nameplate right here for a companion. I don't even see the companion right now. I'm guessing it's like behind the mob down here, but I would expect the name to be here. This guy's name is pretty good. It's right next to his head. I'm not sure if I need to see his health bar in the world. I think that's happening because he's my heal target. I don't know, it's kind of hard to tell. Once like everything else is simplified, maybe that could get changed, but I'm not sure if that's necessary or not. It's nice that it's not here on like on this guy. It's only showing up for the one that you have as your secondary target. Mostly the nameplates. The other one is right here, the mob name and the health bar. Very often it's like much higher than they are, especially for like goblins and other types of small NPC models. You can also tell as things get closer or further away, it gets either worse or better. For example, like here, things seem decent for like this guy is pretty good. The spider one is still like much higher than the spider. The companion one is much higher than the companion. But yeah, these are like smaller models like these guys. So I'd want to see all these nameplates get closer tied to the actual NPC, the 3D model, I mean. And same thing here with this character. Let's see what we can observe from the rest of the video about nameplates. Okay, so real quick, while this guy is casting, his nameplate's actually overlapping his head. So in this case, the nameplate should probably be up here because you can't really read it on his head anyway. So yeah, it's basically just like moving the nameplates up or down based off of the character models. That's what I'm talking about. And also left or right, like we talked about in the example of when we were like zoomed in really close. So I'm looking at this guy right here, and his nameplate is up here. I think there's also another nameplate right here. I'm not sure who that is. But anyway, as we're watching this guy animate, his name is basically staying still. And I'm not sure if it would be too busy to have the name like animate with the actual character or not. Oh, there's that other person. So that name goes with that person, and this name goes with this person. There's a person right there. So yeah, anyway, there's a lot of polish that can go with the names. But basically that's what I'm talking about with increase immersiveness by tying UI tighter to the game world. The next thing I want to talk about is the class icons next to the names that you see in the party window. At first, I thought this was really cool because I didn't know who they were when they were joining the group at first. If I'm not the group leader and they're just like joining in, or I just join into a new group, I'm trying to figure out who people are, and I don't have to like do /who for every person. That's cool. But I think the thing that's happening is when I'm playing in the group, I'm thinking more of these characters as their classes rather than their actual player names. So it's like causing this depersonalization, obviously that's misspelled, of people in my group. Like I'm not remembering player names very well. I think it has to do with the class icons being there all the time. So if we did the thing that I was talking about where everything is simplified and you only see like name, health bar, name, health bar. And then there's like, if you mouse over it, maybe you see the class icons and you can see the class names. I think that would resolve this issue where I'm not remembering people's names because like the vast majority of the time you're not looking at the detailed view in that case. And then you're focusing on the more on the names and you're remembering like, oh yeah, Rakthul is the tank, Lithard is a DPS. So that's the last thing. That one's more minor. It's something that I noticed that I think is probably worth taking into account somehow. Okay, thanks for coming to my TED Talk. And oh yeah, I just thought of one other small thing that I noticed related to the numbers on the ability bar as the timer is counting down for the cooldown. It seems like this is also contributing to the busyness of lots of animations happening on the screen. So I'm really curious what it would feel like if those weren't there and the abilities were just grayed out when they weren't usable, like in Classic EverQuest, and you were relying more on feel and intuition of when they're going to be available. So that, yeah, I think that would be an interesting experiment. Maybe something that's like a player preference, I guess, and would be an option to turn off. I don't know. All right. Anyway, hopefully this is helpful and helps inspire a new and improved UI for Pantheon.